My father spent 18 years calling me stupid and told everyone I'd never amount to anything. He started begging when he found out how much I was making. My father started calling me stupid before I could even spell the word. I was 5 years old when I brought home my first report card, and he looked at it and shook his head. He said I would never amount to anything if this was the best I could do. I had all satisfactory marks. I was 5. That set the tone for the next 18 years of my life. Every test score was disappointing. Every grade was not good enough. Every achievement was dismissed as luck or low standards. My father had decided I was stupid, and nothing I did could change his mind. He said it so often it became background noise. "You're so stupid. How can you be this stupid? I can't believe I raised someone so stupid." He said it at dinner. He said it during homework. He said it in front of relatives and family friends and anyone who would listen. He told people I was the slow one in the family. He told my teachers to be patient with me because I wasn't the brightest. He told my younger brother that at least he got the brains in the family. My brother learned to call me stupid too because my father laughed when he did it. My mother never defended me. She said my father was just trying to motivate me. She said he wanted me to try harder and this was his way of pushing me. She said I was too sensitive and needed thicker skin. She said lots of parents talk to their kids this way, and I should be grateful he cared enough to have expectations. I didn't feel grateful. I felt small. I started believing him around age 12. I stopped raising my hand in class because I was afraid of giving wrong answers. I stopped trying new things because I assumed I would fail. I picked easy classes in high school because I didn't think I could handle difficult ones. I applied to average colleges because my father said no good school would want someone like me. I got into all of them and he said it was because standards had dropped. When I graduated high school, my father gave a toast at my party. He said he was proud of me for making it through despite my limitations. He said he hoped college wouldn't be too hard for me. He said maybe I should consider a trade instead since not everyone was cut out for academics. My relatives laughed uncomfortably. I smiled and said nothing. That was the last time I let his words define me. College was 4 hours away, and I finally had room to breathe. Without my father constantly telling me I was stupid, I started to realize maybe I wasn't. I took challenging classes and passed them. I joined study groups and contributed meaningfully. I made friends who thought I was smart and funny and worth knowing. I got on the dean's list my second semester. I called home to share the news, and my father said they probably curved the grades. I stopped calling home after that. I graduated with honors in engineering. My father didn't come to the ceremony because he said it was too far to drive for someone who probably wouldn't find a job anyway. I found a job before I even graduated. It paid more than my father made after 30 years at his company. I didn't tell him the salary. I just let him assume I was barely getting by like he expected. For the next 5 years, I built a life completely separate from my family. I got promoted twice. I bought a condo in a nice neighborhood. I started investing and watching my savings grow. I dated someone who respected my intelligence and challenged me in good ways. I read books and learned new skills and proved to myself over and over that my father was wrong about me. He never asked about my life during our rare phone calls. He just talked about my brother who still lived at home and couldn't hold a job. He talked about his own problems at work and his health issues and his complaints about the world. Sometimes he'd make comments about how I probably didn't understand what he was going through because I didn't have real responsibilities. I let him believe whatever he wanted. Then my brother needed money. He'd gotten into debt and my parents couldn't cover it because my father's retirement wasn't what he expected. My mother called me crying and asked if I could help. She said they were desperate and I was their only hope. She said family takes care of family. I asked how much they needed. She said $15,000. I could have paid it easily. I had more than that sitting in a single investment account. But I thought about 18 years of being called stupid. I thought about the confidence my father stole from me. I thought about all the times he dismissed my achievements and celebrated my failures. I thought about the toast at my graduation party. I told my mother I would think about it. Then I called my father directly. I asked him about the situation and he immediately got defensive. He said it wasn't his fault my brother made bad choices. He said the economy was unfair to young people. He said I probably couldn't help anyway since I was always the slow one and probably didn't have 2 pennies to rub together. I let him finish. Then I told him my actual salary. I told him about my condo and my investments and my promotions. I told him I had the money to help, but I wanted to understand something first. I asked why he spent my entire childhood calling me stupid when I clearly wasn't. He got quiet. Then he got angry. He started yelling. His voice went loud and sharp through the phone. He said I was lying about my salary because someone as stupid as me couldn't possibly make that much money. He said I was showing off and trying to make him feel small. He said I was making up numbers to hurt him. He kept repeating that there was no way I made more than he did after 30 years at his company. He said the numbers didn't make sense. He said I must be including benefits or stock options or something that wasn't real money. He said engineers didn't make that much unless they worked for huge companies, and I probably worked for some small place that was lying to me. I let him yell. I sat on my couch and held the phone away from my ear and let him get it all out. When he finally stopped to breathe, I told him I could send him proof. I said I had pay stubs and tax returns and investment statements if he wanted to see them. I said I could forward him my W-2 from last year. The silence on the other end was different from before. It wasn't angry silence. It was the silence of someone realizing they were wrong. I could hear his breathing change. It got slower and heavier. I could picture him sitting in his old recliner with his face getting red. I waited. I didn't fill the silence with more words. I just waited for him to process what I'd said. Then he switched tactics completely. His voice got calmer but not softer. He said the reason he pushed me so hard was because he knew I needed extra motivation to succeed. He said he saw potential in me that I didn't see in myself. He said calling me stupid was his way of lighting a fire under me. He said if he hadn't been so hard on me, I never would have worked hard enough to get where I am now. I laughed out loud. I couldn't help it. The sound came out of my mouth before I could stop it. I asked him to explain how calling me stupid in front of relatives was motivational. I asked him how telling my teachers I was slow helped me succeed. I asked him how laughing when my brother called me names built my confidence. I asked him how missing my college graduation because he said I wouldn't find a job anyway was pushing me toward success. He got quiet again. Then he started talking about how I was taking things out of context. He said I was remembering things wrong. He said I was being too sensitive about things that happened years ago. He said everyone disciplines their kids differently, and I turned out fine, so clearly his methods worked. The phone went dead. He hung up on me. I sat there staring at my phone screen for a few seconds. Then I set it down on the coffee table and put my head in my hands. My phone rang again 50 minutes later. It was my mother. I could hear her crying before she even said hello. She said I had humiliated my father and broken his heart. She said he was sitting in his chair refusing to talk, and she'd never seen him so upset. She said I was being cruel when the family needed help. She said bringing up old history during a crisis was selfish and mean. She said my father had always done his best, and I was punishing him for not being perfect. She said parents make mistakes and children are supposed to forgive them. She said I was holding a grudge over things that happened when I was a child. She said I needed to grow up and let go of the past. She said my brother was in real trouble and I was making everything about me instead of helping family. I told her I would think about helping with the money. But first I needed a real conversation with my father about our history. I said I needed him to acknowledge what he did and how it affected me. I said I needed him to stop pretending he was motivating me when he was actually tearing me down. My mother's crying got louder. She said I was holding the family hostage. She said I was making unreasonable demands during a crisis. She said my father would never agree to talk about the past because it was too painful for him. She said I was being manipulative by using money as leverage. She said this wasn't how family treated each other. She said if I really loved them, I would help without conditions. She said my brother's debt wasn't going to wait while I worked through my childhood issues. She said I was being selfish and vindictive. Then she hung up too. Hannah found me on the couch 2 hours later. I was shaking. My hands were trembling and I couldn't make them stop. She dropped her work bag by the door and came straight to me. She sat down and pulled me against her. I told her everything. I told her about the phone call with my father and the yelling and his ridiculous claim that calling me stupid was motivation. I told her about my mother's call and the crying and the accusations. I told her about the $15,000 and the conditions I'd set. Hannah held me tighter. She didn't say anything for a long time. She just let me talk and shake and cry angry tears about 18 years of being called stupid. When I finally stopped talking, she kissed the top of my head. She said she was proud of me for standing up to them. She said she knew how hard that must have been. Then Hannah said I should talk to someone professional about this before making any final decisions. She said this was too big to handle alone. She reminded me that I had the power now. She said I could use it wisely instead of just reacting from hurt. She said I deserved to process everything with someone who could help me see clearly. She said my parents had spent 18 years messing with my head, and I needed someone neutral to help me untangle it all. I knew she was right. I'd seen a therapist briefly 2 years ago during a stressful work period. His name was Raymond. He'd helped me deal with a difficult project and a boss who kept undermining me. I still had his number in my phone. I called Raymond's office the next morning. The receptionist said he had an opening that afternoon because of a cancellation. I took it. I sat in his office at 3 o'clock and told him everything. I started with being 5 years old and bringing home my first report card. I told him about 18 years of being called stupid. I told him about college and building a life away from my family. I told him about the phone calls and the money and the conditions I'd set. Raymond listened without interrupting. When I finished, he asked me what I thought my father's words said about him, not about me. I didn't understand the question at first. He explained that people who constantly tear others down are usually dealing with their own feelings of inadequacy. He said my father's need to call me stupid probably had nothing to do with my actual abilities. He said it was about his own insecurity. He said my success threatened him because it proved he was wrong about me. He said abusive parents often can't handle being proven wrong because it forces them to face what they've done. My phone rang during the drive home from Raymond's office. It was my brother. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pull over and pick up. He didn't wait for me to say hello. He just started apologizing. He said he was sorry for learning to call me stupid when we were kids. He said he knew it was wrong even back then, but our father laughed when he did it, so he kept doing it. He said he'd been thinking about it ever since our mother told him about the phone calls. He said our father destroyed his confidence too. He said it was just in a different way. He said our father constantly compared him to other people's successful children. He said nothing he did was ever good enough either. He said our father told him he was lazy and unmotivated and would never amount to anything. He said he started believing it just like I had. My brother kept talking. He said he got into debt because he kept failing at jobs. He said he'd start something new and our father would make comments about how he'd probably mess it up. He said the criticism made him afraid to try anything challenging. He said he took easy jobs that didn't pay well because he was scared of failing at harder ones. He said he got into credit card debt trying to keep up appearances and prove he was doing okay. He said our father's voice was in his head every time he applied for a better job or tried to do something ambitious. He said he could hear our father saying he wasn't good enough. I sat in my parked car and listened to my brother describe a childhood that sounded different from mine, but damaged him in the same ways. I realized we were both victims of the same toxic parenting. We were just broken in different directions. I was called stupid, so I worked myself nearly to death trying to prove I wasn't. He was called lazy, so he gave up trying because he believed he'd fail anyway. I asked my brother what he really wanted from me besides the money. He went quiet for a few seconds and I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. He said he wanted a relationship with his sister. He said he missed having someone who understood what it was like growing up in that house. He said he'd been jealous of me for years because I got out and built something good while he stayed stuck. He said watching me succeed made him feel worse about his own failures. He said our father compared them constantly, and it made him resent me even though he knew it wasn't my fault. He said he was sorry for all of it and he wanted to try again if I'd let him. I told him I needed time to think about everything. He said he understood and thanked me for listening. We hung up and I sat in my car for another 20 minutes just staring at the steering wheel. The call started 3 days later. My mother's sister called first and said she heard about the family situation. She said blood is thicker than water and I should help without making waves. She said my father had his faults, but he was still my father. She said I'd regret it someday if I let pride get in the way of helping family. I thanked her for her opinion and got off the phone as quickly as possible. Then my father's brother called and said basically the same thing. Then my mother's cousin called. Then people I barely remembered from childhood gatherings started leaving voicemails about family loyalty and forgiveness. Some of them were pushy and made me feel guilty. Others were gentler but still pushed the same message. Help your family. Don't hold grudges. Everyone makes mistakes. Be the bigger person. I stopped answering calls from numbers I didn't recognize. But not everyone took my parents' side. My mother's younger sister called on the 5th day, and her tone was different. She asked if I was okay first instead of launching into opinions about what I should do. She asked if I wanted to talk about what happened when I was growing up. I said I didn't know where to start. She said she remembered some of it and she was sorry she never spoke up. She said she tried once to tell my father he was too hard on me, and he stopped talking to her for 6 months. She said my mother begged her to apologize and keep the peace, so she did. She said she regretted it now. Then she told me something I never knew. She said my father's dad treated him the same way. She said my grandfather called my father worthless and said he'd never amount to anything. She said the verbal abuse in our family went back at least 3 generations that she knew of. She said my grandfather learned it from his father, who came from the old country where that kind of treatment was normal. She said it was a cycle that nobody ever broke. She said my father probably didn't even realize he was repeating what was done to him. She said trauma gets passed down like eye color or height unless someone stops it. I thanked her for telling me and said I needed to process it. She said to call her if I needed to talk. She said she was proud of me for standing up for myself. I called Raymond and got an appointment for the next day. I told him about my aunt's revelation and how it complicated everything. I said I understood now that my father was damaged too. I said maybe he couldn't help how he treated me because that's what he learned. Raymond let me talk for a while and then he asked me a question. He asked if understanding where my father's behavior came from changed what it did to me. I said no. He said that was the right answer. He said understanding trauma and abuse patterns is important for context, but it doesn't erase the damage or excuse the behavior. He said my father had choices every single day about how to treat me. He said my father could have recognized the pattern and broken it. He said my father could have gone to therapy or read parenting books or talked to other parents about better ways to motivate kids. He said my father could have apologized the first time he saw how his words affected me. He said my father chose not to do any of those things for 18 years. He said understanding why someone hurt you doesn't mean you have to accept continued hurt or enable their refusal to change. He said I could feel compassion for my father's trauma while still protecting myself from his ongoing toxicity. He said those two things weren't contradictory. I felt something settle in my chest when he said that. I'd been feeling guilty about my anger once I learned about my grandfather. But Raymond helped me see that my father had agency and choices, and he chose to continue the cycle instead of breaking it. My father called 2 weeks after our last conversation. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. His voice sounded different when I picked up. He sounded tired. He said he'd been thinking about our conversation, and he wanted to talk. He said maybe he was too hard on me sometimes when I was growing up. He said he didn't mean to hurt me, and he was just trying to prepare me for a tough world. He said parents make mistakes, and he did his best with what he knew. I waited to see if he'd say more, but that seemed to be it. I asked him if he remembered the toast at my high school graduation party. He said he remembered being proud of me for graduating. I said that wasn't what I asked. I said I asked if he remembered telling a room full of people that I made it through despite my limitations. I said I asked if he remembered suggesting I skip college for a trade because I wasn't cut out for academics. He got quiet. I kept going. I listed other specific memories. I reminded him about telling my teachers I was slow. I reminded him about laughing when my brother called me stupid. I reminded him about dismissing my dean's list achievement by saying they must have curved the grades. I reminded him about skipping my college graduation because he assumed I wouldn't find a job. He interrupted me and said I was exaggerating. He said I was remembering things wrong and making them sound worse than they were. He said he never called me stupid that much and I was being oversensitive. He said lots of parents push their kids and I turned out fine, so obviously his approach worked. I felt my jaw clench. Nothing had actually changed. He still didn't get it. I made him an offer. I said I'd give them $10,000 for my brother's debt directly. I said the other $5,000 was conditional. I said he needed to go to family therapy with me for 6 sessions. I said we'd work with someone who specialized in family dynamics and childhood trauma. I said if he did that and showed genuine effort to understand what he put me through, then I'd give them the rest of the money. I said it wasn't about punishing him. I said it was about making sure this cycle stopped, and we could maybe have an actual relationship instead of the broken thing we had now. The silence stretched for a long time. Then my father started yelling. He said therapy was for crazy people and people with real problems. He said there was nothing wrong with him and I was trying to make him look bad. He said if I really cared about family, I'd help without putting strings on it. He said I was being manipulative and using money to control people. He said my brother needed help now and I was playing games. He said he thought I was smarter than this, but apparently he was wrong. I noticed he was back to insulting my intelligence. I told him the offer stood and he could think about it. He hung up on me. My mother called an hour later. She was crying again. She begged me to just give them the money without conditions. She said my father would never agree to therapy because he didn't believe in it. She said I was punishing the whole family for his pride. She said my brother's situation was getting worse, and they needed the full amount now. She said I was being selfish and cruel. She said she didn't raise me to withhold help from family when I had the means to give it. She said I was breaking her heart. She said she didn't understand how I could be so cold. I let her finish. Then I told her my final decision. I said I'd send my brother $10,000 directly through a bank transfer. I said it would clear his immediate debt. I said I wouldn't give anything more until my father acknowledged the real damage he caused and showed willingness to work on it. I said this wasn't about the money. I said this was about 18 years of systematic emotional abuse that nobody in the family ever acknowledged or stopped. I said I was done pretending it didn't happen just to keep the peace. My mother called me selfish one more time and hung up. I opened my banking app and set up the transfer to my brother's account that same night. I added a note in the transfer memo field. It said I loved him and wanted him to get help for himself, not just because the family needed money. The confirmation screen showed the $10,000 moving from my account to his. I took a screenshot and saved it. My brother texted me 20 minutes later. He said thank you and that he knew this was hard for me. He said he'd been thinking about therapy for a while but was too scared to start. He said knowing I believed in him enough to help gave him the push he needed. He said he'd already looked up therapists in his area and was going to make calls in the morning. I texted back that I was proud of him for taking that step. I meant it. My parents didn't contact me for 3 days after that. When my mother finally called, she didn't mention the money or the therapy condition. She just asked how I was doing in this fake cheerful voice like nothing had happened. I kept my answers short and didn't give her anything real. She eventually stopped calling as often. My father never called at all. I started seeing Raymond twice a week instead of once. We worked through the anger and the hurt and the weird guilty feeling I had about setting boundaries with my family. He helped me understand that I was mourning something I never actually had. I'd been holding on to this idea that someday my parents would see me clearly and apologize, and we'd have a real relationship. Raymond said I needed to grieve that fantasy because it was never going to happen. Some parents don't change. Some parents can't admit they were wrong. Some parents would rather lose their children than face what they did. The grief hit me harder than I expected. I'd cry in my car before work or in the shower where Hannah couldn't hear. She knew anyway. She'd find me staring at nothing and pull me close without asking questions. She'd make dinner on nights when I couldn't function. She'd remind me that choosing myself wasn't selfish even when it felt that way. She'd tell me I was brave for breaking a cycle that had probably gone on for generations in my family. She never once suggested I should just give in and make peace with my parents. She trusted me to know what I needed. My brother called me 6 months later on a Tuesday evening. I almost didn't answer because I was tired and didn't want to deal with family drama. But something made me pick up. He sounded different. Clearer somehow. He said he'd been going to therapy every week since I sent the money. He said he'd gotten a job at a warehouse that wasn't glamorous but paid steady and had benefits. He said he'd been working on understanding why he couldn't hold down jobs before, and it came back to the same thing as me. Our father had convinced him he was worthless too, just in different ways. He said his therapist helped him see that our father's constant comparisons to other people's successful kids made him afraid to try anything because he knew he'd be measured and found lacking. He said he finally felt like he could breathe. Then he asked if we could have dinner sometime. Just the two of us. No parents. He said he wanted to build a real relationship with his sister instead of the broken thing we had growing up. I said yes. We met at a restaurant halfway between our cities 2 weeks later. It felt strange sitting across from him as adults, instead of as the roles our father had assigned us. He looked healthier than I'd seen him in years. We talked about our childhoods honestly for the first time ever. He apologized for calling me stupid when we were kids. I apologized for leaving him alone with our parents when I went to college. We compared notes on the different ways our father had damaged us, and realized we'd both been fighting the same war from different trenches. We agreed to stay in contact separate from our parents. We exchanged real phone numbers instead of just using the family group chat. We made plans to meet again next month. When we hugged goodbye in the parking lot, I felt something shift. I'd spent so long thinking I had to choose between my family and my peace. But I could have my brother without having my parents. I could build something new instead of trying to fix something that was always broken. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in months. I'd chosen my own worth over their approval, and somehow ended up with more family than I started with, just not the family I was born into.